Deputy Thomas P. Broughan. Deputy Broughan to introduce.
Thanks, Clancorla. Well, Minister, I was listening earlier on to your replies to colleagues who are in the chamber in relation to the carnage in Syria, which has taken perhaps, I don't know, 500,000 lives at this stage, and which has displaced obviously millions of the Syrian people. And I know you've said you've been in contact with ambassadors and so on, but just to, you said that Ireland was ready to play a positive role. I think you meant a very strongly positive role in the resolution and the bringing about of an immediate and final ceasefire. And I just want to know, in relation to the International Syria Support Group, if in fact with them you've been very much involved, and have you organised any meetings, for example, with the Syrian Foreign Minister, with Sergei Lavrov, with the Russian Foreign Minister, and indeed with the other, all the other, if you like, non-Syrian forces who are combatants there?
I wish to reiterate again, Ceann Comhairle, my total condemnation of the bombardment of Aleppo. The attacks by the Assad regime and its allies, including Russia, against eastern Aleppo are clearly disproportionate and unacceptable. The deliberate targeting, for example, of hospitals, of medical personnel, of schools, of essential services, of essential infrastructure, and widespread civilian casualties may indeed amount to war crimes. Our concerns have been conveyed in the clearest possible terms to the Russian authorities. Ireland doesn't recognise the legitimacy of the 2014 Syrian presidential elections, and Ireland has ceased all diplomatic or political contacts with the Assad regime. My EU colleagues and I spoke on Monday, the 17th of October, with UN Special Envoy de Mistura, underlining our commitment to a strong level of support for his efforts to stem the destruction of Syria and its people. I met with US Secretary of State Kerry and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon during my recent visit to the United Nations in New York. I discussed the crisis in Syria with them and with other international partners over a range of bilateral meetings. I continue to press for accountability, both to provide the victims with the hope of redress, and in the hope that it will deter those involved from even worse atrocities in the area. This has been central to our interventions at the UN in New York and in Geneva, my own interventions and statements at the Foreign Affairs Council in Luxembourg last week, and together with our EU partners, Ireland remains fully engaged through the European Union in the International Syria Support Group. We will continue to support efforts to find a political resolution to the unacceptable level of conflict and hostilities in Aleppo and Syria.
You say these may indeed be a war crime. I mean, why would you preface your remarks like may be a war? These are war crimes, quite clearly. Obviously the involvement of Russia and in pursuit of its own strategic interests presumably has enabled the Assad regime to continue making war on its own people. Assad says there will be no more humanitarian pauses. What's your attitude to that? I think you were in this chamber with me when we heard the news about Srebrenica. This situation in East Aleppo has been compared to Guernica. I mean, the incredible sufferings of these 250,000 people in East Aleppo. It's a total outrage. It is a war crime. And what are you going to do about it? I mean, have you, for example, met the representatives of the Saudi Arabians, of the Saudi Arabian government? If you track, obviously, the role of al-Nusra, of fascist groups like ISIS and the other groups, in Syria and in Iraq. Ultimately, the trail leads always back to Saudi Arabia. I mean, have you been in touch with Saudi Arabia? With you mentioned Egypt, that you've met an Egyptian counterpart, with people in the Arab League. But we seem to be just almost like helpless, bewildered bystanders. We need to take action. And indeed, Minister, with your colleague, the Minister for Justice, where are the refugees that this country promised to bring to security and safety here, people fleeing that country?
Minister.
I've raised this issue along with the people with whom specific reference I've made earlier. I have raised the matter of Syria with the incoming Secretary General of the Arab League. Also raised the issue directly in the context of my conversations with Foreign Minister Sukri of Egypt, an influential interlocutor in the region. But Ireland, together with our European partners, Ceann Comhairle, made it clear in a statement of the 4th of June 2014 that we do not accept the legitimacy of the presidential election in Syria. They were held under a flawed electoral law which imposed identification requirements that deprived most Syrians living in the area under opposition control of their ability even to cast a vote. So the facts call into question the legitimacy of Assad's regime, its authority, and indeed its authority to invite military support from other states. I made that position clear in a recent meeting I had with the representative of Russia in Ireland, the Russian ambassador. And I will continue to amplify the points as raised in this House on numerous.
But surely, Minister, every time you open your mouth, you should be calling for a cessation of these savage attacks on the people of Aleppo and indeed in other parts of Syria. Have you made, spoken to the United States representatives and ambassador and the Secretary of State and to the UK itself, countries that supply, obviously, Saudi Arabia with massive amounts of modern weaponry, which then ends up on the streets and on the outskirts of Aleppo? I mean, isn't this part of the problem that we have all of these countries, the US, the UK, we have obviously Iran, Turkey now, and Russia, so up to 14 or 15 foreign administrations, jurisdictions interfering. You've spoken rightly, I think, that the solution has to be, if you like, led from Syria by Syrian people. And a final point on that. I think the situation, obviously, it needs much more urgency and whatever we can give as a leadership from this small country to try and bring about a resolution. Will you be meeting, by the way, representatives of the Syrian churches who I believe are coming to both the Christian and Islamic churches who are coming to this country next month?
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Well, I agree that every effort must be made by the international community to confront the brutality and terrorism of Daesh. This, as the Deputy will be aware, is a most complex situation in Syria. But I'm of the view that the only solution must be a political solution rather than a military solution. Yes, I have discussed the matter with Secretary of State John Kerry recently in New York, and I hope to have a further opportunity over the next few days of engaging further with the Secretary of State. Just on the matter of refugees, and this is an issue that has been the subject matter of debate here with my colleague, the Minister for Justice, the Taoiseach. We agreed to accept 4,000 asylum seekers from the region. We've now resettled 500 under the Irish Refugee Protection Programme. Our target is 520 by the end of this year, in a few weeks' time. All of these people have come from Lebanon. On the relocation issue, can I acknowledge that the progress has been slow, but it has been slow for all our EU colleagues. To date, a total of 69 Syrians have come to Ireland from Greece. Further 41 are due to arrive next week. But again, I believe it's important that we all work together right across the European Union to play our part. And indeed, only in the last few days, officials and representatives from the Irish government are in Greece in order to ensure that we play our part on the tragic situation of unaccompanied minors. But I wish to assure the Deputy that I will continue to take all advantage at every opportunity to raise this position. And you're right, Ireland in these matters does exercise a level of influence. And I will be relaying issues that were raised here last week in the course of the debate on resolutions of this House in order that we play our part as a small but nevertheless influential, independent, neutral country.
Thank you very much. Deputy Broughan, do you want to come on? Fine.